This episode, I want to begin a bit differently from the others. I'm not going to open with a client story. I'm going to open with my own. I was a sensitive boy, to some extent still am. I was also in the wrong environment for sensitivity. So I learned to bury it. Not dramatically, but quietly over the years. The way a child learns anything by repetition, by consequences, by understanding what is required out of him. And by the time I was an adult, the burial was complete. I had replaced the sensitivity with something harder. Controlled my face, I held my anger in my jaw, physically held it there. I was also the kind of man who handled things, who kept going, who did not make his inner life anyone else's concern. You can say I was frozen inside. I spent years in various environments that reinforced this. Family was one, the professional world. I moved into army, saw difficult things. I absorbed them the only way I had been taught to, quietly and without complaint. Before I turned 30, I already had thinning hair on the crown, stomach that bloated every time I felt inadequate, and which happened often, though I would not have used that word at that time. I also had a relationship with sweets that had nothing to do with hunger. And now my mother's side are all diabetic. My younger brother is a diabetic. I knew the direction I was heading. And in my mid 40s, or early 40s, I also noticed signs of prostate issues. Now, somewhere inside all of that, I had also been meditating since I was 13 years old, reading since before that. I was energy sensitive long before I had a language for it. Later on, I learned Bakfla remedies, became a practitioner, went deep into psychosomatics, not exactly through a course, but through the kind of research a man does when he's trying to understand what has been happening in his own body for 30 years. So what I found was this: the body does not lie. It just speaks a language that we were never taught. The bloating was not food. The jaw was not tension, you can say. The hair was not purely genetics. The prostate was not also simply age. They were record, unedited, loyal of everything I had suppressed, either suppressed, controlled, or performed for decades. I'll not say I'm fully arrived. I'm not. Some of it is still moving through. But I understand now what the body was doing all along. So you see, I did not come to this work because I studied your pain. I came to it because I have lived it. If you have been told that your type 2 diabetes is genetic, that your hypertension is lifestyle, that your condition is something to be managed, and something in you keeps asking whether that is the whole story, I built this work for that question, because I have also lived inside that question for a very long time. Welcome to episode 8. I'm Abhinav Sharma. Today we go into the emotional root of type 2 diabetes, also hypertension and the cardiac event, and the specific patterns I see in the men who carry these conditions. Not as an observer, but as someone who recognizes the patterns from inside. He has been managing his type 2 diabetes for 3 years, 5 years, sometimes a decade. He's good at managing it. The HbA1c is controlled. He knows which foods to avoid. He takes his medicine. He has done the diet several times in several forms. And he is, by medical standards, a compliant patient. And he knows that somewhere he has not said out loud to anyone that managing it is not the same as understanding it. Why did this happen? I did everything right. He did, and that is often the most important data point. That reminds me of something. Do you remember the sweet tooth or the relationship with sweets that I have? So whenever I would eat some sweets, my mother and then my wife, they would say, "Don't eat so much sweets. You have diabetes in your family." Now that I should have been stopping it, but I could not, and I did not. Now, this man is also the manager. In most places, the person who is holding things together, the one who handles it. It can be handling the job, the family, the parents, and the decisions that keep landing on his desk, because he's the one who can be relied on to not fall apart. He has been the reliable one for most of his life. He does not complain. He does not ask for much, and he keeps going. That's just what you do. You handle it. Being unwell is not an option. People depend on me. So if you are that man, or if you are the person who loves that man and you have sent him this episode, this one is for you. Let's see what is actually happening. What's the relationship between insulin and cortisol in very plain language? But I'm going to be precise also. That what is the established science and what's my interpretation? Now, we know cortisol, the stress hormone, raises blood sugar. We spoke about it. That's one of its primary function in the acute stress response, fuel the muscles. Now, when the stress response is acute, cortisol rises, emergency passes, cortisol drops, and blood sugar returns to the baseline. Now, what researchers have found, when cortisol is elevated throughout persistently, the cell's capacity to respond to insulin starts diminishing, and this is insulin resistance. The pancreas starts compensating by producing more insulin, and over time it cannot keep pace. So blood sugar remains elevated and the diagnosis arrives. Now, this is in the endocrinology literature, that the link is between stress and type 2 diabetes. Most well-established finding in psychosomatic research and is text biology. Now, what I add from my observation that precedes type 2 diabetes is not primarily produced by external events. It is produced by the suppression of the emotions. You were angry, but you swallowed the anger year after year. The fear that you had and which got converted into action before you could even feel it. The grief that you could not address. There was the need for rest, for help, for something different that was overridden repeatedly by the demands of life. Now, the body cannot tell the difference between a tiger and 40 years of handling it. Both produce the insulin resistance over time. Now, I want to offer a frame here, and I offer it as observation, symbolic interpretation, not as proven mechanism. But I do find it useful. You can decide whether you find it useful also. Diabetes, at its most literal, is the body refusing to process sweetness. The sugar that should nourish the cell cannot get in. The sweetness is circulating in you without being received. Now, clients who have type 2 diabetes, men particularly, they consistently have a specific history. Not in every case, but it can be called a pattern. A life in which sweetness, tenderness, pleasure taken without guilt. The act of receiving care rather than only giving it was either not available or was actively refused. The man who was told that men do not receive, they provide. They do not rest without earning it. They do not lean on anyone, because to lean is to fail the first definition of being a strong man. So what they say, I don't know how to let anyone take care of me. Rest feels wrong, like I am wasting time. I cannot ask for help. It's not what I do. Now, the body, in its faithful mirroring, begins to refuse the sweetness also at the cellular level. Now, I'm not saying diabetes is caused by emotional deprivation alone. I'm saying that in the history of the people I work with and my family, the emotional and physiology map onto each other, which I find quite significant. And when that emotional layer is addressed, when the man, often for the first time in his adult life, learns to receive, the metabolic system shifts. Now, let me describe the 3 specific emotional patterns I see most often. The man who was not allowed to not know. This is that person who learned that uncertainty was a form of failure, that the appropriate response to not knowing was to figure it out and not admit that I don't know, I have to have the answer. Not having the answer is not an option. Now, the cost of this is a nervous system that is perpetually in problem-solving mode, that cannot enter rest, because rest equals tolerating the unresolved. Every uncertainty, every open loop makes a cortisol producing emergency. The HbA1c of such a man often improves measurably when he first learns to say, I do not know, and to tolerate the silence that follows. Second comes the man running on his father's nervous system. Almost every male client I work with a cardiac or metabolic condition has a father whose body told a story first. A father who also handled everything, who also never rested, who also had the heart attack or the diabetes or early demise that the family quietly attributed to stress or in some stages genetics also, and moved on. Now, the son who inherited the template without ever being told that it was template and not genes, who has been running on the same nervous system, same suppression pattern, same refusal of need or help, because that is what it looks like to be a man in his family. My father never complained, neither do I. My family don't talk about these things. So the template is generational. The body has been keeping the score for 2 generations, sometimes 3 or more. Now, work is to name it, to see it clearly that you can choose differently. Next comes the man whose anger went into work. Now, anger that has no expression will find other addresses. Men who were taught that anger was dangerous or unacceptable, or who were taught that the only acceptable form of it was competitive achievement, it goes into the work. Working for 14 hours a day, relentlessly pushing productivity that looks like ambition but is running on empty and has nothing to do with genuine passion for the work. I work this hard because I have to, because there's no other way. I don't know what I'd do if I stopped. I just have to sit with everything. Now, this sitting with everything is precisely what the body needs and precisely what the pattern of work as anger management cannot allow. Now, let me take 2 examples, anonymous, but the details they will tell for themselves. The first one, 51 years old, type 2 diabetes for 4 years, medically managing it. Now, his wife sent him to me because she came to know about my work through a course I was doing. He came to the first session. He said, she has pushed me. In the first 10 minutes, he said, I am a very practical person. I do not believe in this kind of thing. Tell me what to do and I'll do it. Okay, yeah, sure. I said, I will. But first tell me that in the years before your diagnosis, what were you carrying? My father was ill because of old age. My son had dropped out of college and my mother needed daily reassurance. I said, that is not a usual thing. Now that is a tremendous amount of what you're handling. He said, I handled it. Okay, what were you feeling while you were handling it? Now this question, specially asked to men, stumps them, and he was no different. Quiet for a long time. Then he said, I don't know, I'm not sure. And that is where we started. Now 18 months later, with his doctor's knowledge and supervision, he was off 2 of his 3 medications. His HbA1c was the best it had been in a decade. And for the first time in his life, he told his adult son that I'm proud of you. First time an adult father hugging his adult son. He told me that I never hugged my own father and he never hugged me. So in the last session, he said that I thought that it was going to be about diabetes, that you will give me some lecture or something, but it turned out to be about my whole life. This second person, this I have told you before also, this person was approximately 38, well settled, married, with children, and he came to me for some other work. Basically, he was doing shadow work and he came to me for some guidance. And when I started speaking to him, I came to know about his story. He was carrying so much inside. I asked him that when was the last time that you rested without any purpose? And he thought for a very long time. Then he said quietly, I'm not sure I have. Not since I was 6. Now what happened at 6 was that he was sent off to his aunt. And that fear, that resentment, that anger was not allowing him to rest also. So the work was not to fix his symptoms. The work was to return him to the inside of his own life, to give him in his late 30s the first experience of living rather than functioning. Now, the body, when it is finally lived in, often begins to heal. Now, the details have been changed, but the essence has been preserved. Now, coming on to the most significant variable that I have observed in men who improve from type 2 diabetes, beyond diet, beyond medication, beyond exercise, is permission. A permission to be unwell without it being a failure. Permission to ask for help without losing self-respect. And a permission to not know without having to pretend otherwise. Permission often for the first time in 40 or 50 years to receive help and to know that receiving is not weakness. Now, that is the medicine the body has been waiting for. The cell that finally accepts insulin, where the nervous system has been given permission to stop running the emergency. That permission from the inside is what changes that trajectory. Of course, it takes time. It takes a container also. It takes honesty of kind that the pattern itself has made very hard. But I watched it happen in people who were told they would be on medication for life. Not always, but sometimes. Enough to make the conversation worth having. Now, this week's question, and I want the men listening to sit with this one. When did you last let someone take care of you? Not tolerate it or endure it, but actually let it in. Now, if the answer is that you cannot remember, that is the data point. Next week, we come to PCOS, the episode for women who have been told that the condition is about their weight, their diet, their willpower, when it's almost always about something else entirely. Thank you for being here, and see you next time.